What would you do if Ryan Gosling walked into your workplace and everyone started attacking him with false accusations? For Destiny Williams, a 24-year-old waitress at Lucy's Diner, this wasn't just a random daydream. It became reality on a Tuesday night that would change her life forever. The evening started like any other, with Destiny serving coffee to the regular customers who treated Lucy's like their second home. She had no idea that in just a few minutes, the star of La La Land would walk through that door, or that defending him would cost her the job she desperately needed to help put her sister through college. But this isn't just another celebrity encounter story. It's about what happens when someone chooses to stand up for the truth, even when staying quiet would be easier. And trust me, you won't believe how this ends. The bell above the door chimed, and Destiny glanced up from wiping down the counter. Her heart literally skipped a beat. There he was, Ryan Gosling, looking exactly like he'd just stepped off a movie set, but somehow more real. He was wearing a simple black hoodie and jeans, trying to blend in, but there's no hiding that face everyone knows from La La Land and Drive. The diner fell so quiet you could hear the coffee machine humming. Old Mr. Peterson nearly choked on his apple pie. Mrs. Martinez stopped mid-sentence in her usual gossip about her neighbor's garden. And Jenny, the other waitress, practically dropped her coffee pot. "Is that?" whispered Tom, one of the regulars at the counter. Destiny took a deep breath, reminding herself to act professional. Just another customer, she thought, even as her hands shook slightly. She grabbed her notepad and approached his table, the quiet booth in the corner where the lighting wasn't too bright. "Welcome to Lucy's," she said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "What can I get for you tonight?" Ryan looked up with those famous blue eyes and smiled, that same warm smile that had charmed millions on screen. "Just a black coffee and maybe whatever pie you'd recommend?" His voice was softer than in the movies, more down to earth. "Our apple pie is pretty famous around here," Destiny replied, trying to keep it casual while very aware of every eye in the diner watching their interaction. "Sounds perfect," he nodded, then turned to look out the window, seeming lost in thought. As Destiny walked back to get his order, she could hear the whispers starting. The regulars were all talking in hushed voices, some excited, others not so much. She caught fragments of their conversations. "What's he doing in a place like this? Probably just for show. Bet he won't even eat that pie." Little did they know, those whispers were about to turn into something much bigger. Something that would test Destiny's courage in ways she never expected. The diner stayed unusually quiet as Ryan ate his pie, with only the occasional clink of forks and whispered conversations breaking the silence. Everything seemed fine until Bob Wheeler, a retired construction worker who'd been coming to Lucy's for 20 years, pushed back his chair with a loud scrape. "Got something to say to you, Hollywood," Bob announced, his voice carrying across the diner as he walked over to Ryan's table. Destiny froze mid-pour at the coffee machine, her stomach tightening. She knew that tone in Bob's voice. It never led to anything good. Ryan looked up calmly, setting down his coffee cup. "Sure, what's on your mind?" "That new movie of yours," Bob started, crossing his arms. "The one where you play that teacher in that rough neighborhood. You got a lot to say about understanding the struggle in all your interviews, don't you?" The diner grew even quieter, if that was possible. Destiny watched as other regulars nodded along with Bob, some even mumbling in agreement. "But what do you really know about struggle?" Bob continued, his voice getting louder. "You show up in our neighborhoods, shoot your movie, talk about giving back to the community. But it's all just for show, isn't it? Just another rich celebrity pretending to care about regular folks to sell movie tickets." Ryan straightened in his seat, but his voice stayed level. "I understand your skepticism," he began, "but the youth center we built during filming Dash." "Youth center?" Bob scoffed. "You mean that fancy building none of our kids can afford to use? The one with your name plastered all over it?" More voices joined in now. "Yeah, those programs are too expensive. It's all about the tax write-offs. Just using our community for publicity." Destiny's hands were shaking now, but not from nervousness anymore. She'd seen the local news coverage Bob hadn't bothered to watch. She'd heard from her cousin whose kids got scholarships to that very youth center. She knew the truth, and watching this unfold was making her blood boil. Ryan remained composed, but Destiny could see the hint of hurt in his eyes. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, something in Destiny snapped. 3 years of always smiling, always nodding, always keeping quiet. It all ended in that moment. That's enough. Her voice cut through the chorus of accusations, surprising even herself. That's enough. Destiny's voice rang out again, stronger this time. She stepped out from behind the counter, still holding the coffee pot, her heart pounding but her voice steady. Y'all want to talk about what this man does? Let me tell you what I know. The diner fell silent. Even Bob seemed taken aback by her sudden outburst. Ryan watched her with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. My little cousin Marcus? He goes to that fancy youth center you're talking about, Bob. You know how much his membership costs? Nothing. 0. Because Ryan Gosling made sure 2/3 of the spots are reserved for kids from low-income families. But you wouldn't know that because you didn't bother to ask, did you? She set down the coffee pot, her hands still shaking but her voice growing stronger. And those expensive programs? They've got free acting classes, film workshops, and even college prep courses. My cousin went from nearly dropping out to getting straight A's because he finally found something he cared about. But Bob tried to interrupt. I'm not finished, Destiny continued, surprising herself with her own boldness. Last month, when Miss George's grandson needed that special surgery, the one the insurance wouldn't cover, the youth center held a fundraiser, and guess who matched every single donation? The same man you're all sitting here judging. The diner was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking. Some of the regulars looked down at their plates, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. So maybe, Destiny said, her voice softening but still firm, before we start accusing people of things, we should look at what they're actually doing in our community. Because from where I'm standing, he's doing a lot more than just pretending to care. She finally stopped, suddenly aware of how long she'd been speaking. The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan was looking at her with what appeared to be genuine gratitude, but before anyone could say anything more, a sharp voice cut through the tension. Destiny, my office. Now. Mrs. Johnson, the diner's owner, stood in the doorway to the kitchen, her face tight with anger. Destiny's heart sank to her stomach. In standing up for what was right, she might have just talked herself out of a job she desperately needed. The walk to Mrs. Johnson's office felt like the longest 30 seconds of Destiny's life. Every step echoed against the linoleum floor, punctuated by the whispers that had erupted behind her. Her mind raced to her sister's college tuition, the rent due next week, and their mother's medical bills. All the reasons she couldn't afford to lose this job. Mrs. Johnson closed the office door behind them with a quiet click that somehow felt louder than a slam. The small office, with its outdated furniture and the smell of old paperwork, had never felt more suffocating. 3 years, Destiny, Mrs. Johnson began, her voice tight with controlled anger. 3 years you've worked here, and I've never had a problem with you. But tonight, you just publicly attacked our most loyal customers. Mrs. Johnson, I wasn't attacking anyone, Destiny tried to explain, her voice barely above a whisper. I was just telling the truth about Dash. The truth? Mrs. Johnson cut her off. The truth is that Bob Wheeler and his friends have been coming here every single day for 20 years. The truth is that they keep this place running. The truth is that we're a diner, not a debate club. Destiny felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. So it's okay for them to attack someone who's done nothing but help our community? That's the kind of business we want to be. Mrs. Johnson's expression hardened. What we want to be is still in business. And that means keeping our regular customers happy. She sighed, rubbing her temples. I'm sorry, Destiny, but I think it's best if we part ways. I'll give you 2 weeks' notice, but Dash. A knock on the office door interrupted her. Without waiting for a response, Ryan Gosling stepped in, his presence somehow making the small office feel even smaller. Excuse me, he said politely, but I couldn't help overhearing. He looked at Mrs. Johnson. You're firing her for defending the truth? Mrs. Johnson straightened in her chair. Mr. Gosling, this is a private employee matter, Dash. Of course, he nodded, and I respect that. But before you make your final decision, I think you should know something." He pulled out his phone, showing them the screen. "In the past 10 minutes, someone posted a video of what just happened out there. It's already got thousands of views and shares." Destiny's heart skipped a beat as she saw herself on the small screen, voice clear and passionate, defending Ryan and the youth center. The comments were flooding in. "This waitress is my hero." Clapping hands. Finally someone speaking up for the truth. "Lucy's Diner, where is this? I need to visit." Mrs. Johnson's face paled slightly as she looked at the growing number of shares and positive comments. Ryan continued, his voice gentle but firm. "Sometimes doing the right thing isn't just good ethics, it's good business too. Destiny here just gave your diner the kind of publicity money can't buy. She showed that this place has heart, has principles." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Destiny held her breath, watching Mrs. Johnson's expression shift from anger to uncertainty to calculation. Finally, the older woman sighed. "Maybe I was hasty," she admitted reluctantly. "Destiny, we can discuss this tomorrow when things have cooled down." But Destiny straightened her shoulders, finding a strength she didn't know she had. "Actually, Mrs. Johnson, I don't think there's anything to discuss. You were right about one thing. This isn't the place for me anymore." She reached up and untied her apron, folding it carefully before placing it on the desk. 3 years of playing it safe, of keeping quiet, of putting up with injustice. It all ended with that simple gesture. "Destiny," Ryan spoke up as she turned to leave. "Would you have a moment to talk? Outside?" She nodded, trying to keep her composure as she followed him out of the office. Behind them, Mrs. Johnson called out something about reconsidering, but Destiny kept walking. As they passed through the diner, she could feel every eye on them, Bob and the other regulars, her fellow waitresses, the kitchen staff peering through the service window. The night air hit her face as they stepped outside, and only then did the reality of what she'd just done sink in. She'd just quit her job, the job she desperately needed, the job that helped support her family. What had she been thinking? "I owe you an apology." Ryan's voice broke through her rising panic. "What happened in there? You shouldn't have had to lose your job over defending me." Destiny managed a weak smile. "I didn't lose it. I quit." She tried to laugh, but it came out more like a sob. Probably not the smartest move, but... "Actually," Ryan said, "I think it might be the smartest move you've ever made." Something in his tone made her look up. He was smiling, but it wasn't his famous movie star smile. It was something more genuine, more thoughtful. "How would you feel about putting that passion for defending the truth to work full-time?" "Full-time?" Destiny repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. The neon sign from Lucy's Diner cast a soft glow on the sidewalk where they stood, and passing cars created a gentle background hum. Ryan nodded, leaning against his car. "The youth center we were just talking about? We're expanding, opening 3 more locations across Chicago next year. But here's the thing, we need people who really understand our mission, people who can connect with the community." He paused, his expression sincere. "People like you, Destiny." She blinked, trying to process his words. "Me? But I'm just a waitress. I don't have any experience in..." "Experience?" Ryan chuckled softly. "What I just saw in there was worth more than a decade of experience. You spoke from the heart, stood up for the truth, and did it in a way that made people listen. That's exactly what we need." He pulled out a business card from his wallet. "We're looking for a community outreach coordinator. Someone to bridge the gap between the center and the families we want to help. Someone who knows the neighborhood, understands the struggles, and isn't afraid to fight for what's right." Destiny took the card with trembling fingers, staring at the embossed letters. The salary he mentioned next made her eyes widen. It was more than triple what she made at the diner. "But why me?" she asked, still struggling to believe this was real. "Because in there," Ryan gestured toward the diner, "when everyone was content to judge without knowing the facts, you were the only one who stood up. Not for me, for the truth. For the kids like your cousin Marcus. That's rare, Destiny. That's special." Through the diner's windows, she could see Bob and the other regulars watching them. Mrs. Johnson stood in the doorway, her expression a mixture of regret and curiosity. Jenny, her fellow waitress, gave her a small thumbs up. Aye, Destiny started, looking down at the card again. She thought about her sister's college dreams, her mother's medical bills, all the times she'd had to say no to things because they couldn't afford them. But more than that, she thought about Marcus, about all the other kids in the neighborhood who needed someone in their corner. When do I start? She asked, finally letting herself smile. Ryan's face lit up. How about we discuss the details over coffee tomorrow? Somewhere other than Lucy's, maybe? They both laughed, breaking the tension of the evening. Just then, Destiny's phone buzzed. It was her sister. OMG, you're trending on Twitter. #DinerHero is blowing up. Is that really Ryan Gosling with you outside? Destiny looked up to see several people across the street, filming them with their phones. The video from the diner had spread faster than she could have imagined, turning her moment of courage into something bigger than herself. Welcome to the team, Ryan said, extending his hand. As she shook it, Destiny felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Real, tangible hope. Oh, and Destiny? Ryan added as he opened his car door. That apple pie really was amazing. With a wink, he slid into the driver's seat, leaving her standing there with a business card in one hand and a future she never expected in the other. Inside the diner, she could see Bob slowly walking toward the door. As he stepped outside, his usual gruffness was replaced with something that looked almost like respect. You proved me wrong, girl, he said quietly. About a lot of things. We'll miss you around here. Destiny felt tears welling up again, but this time they weren't from fear or frustration. They were tears of joy, of relief, of possibility. As she watched Ryan's car pull away from the curb, she realized that sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't just standing up for what's right. It's being willing to let that moment change your life forever. What made a young waitress risk everything to stand up for Ryan Gosling that night? Was it pure admiration for a Hollywood star? Or was it something deeper? Maybe a need to fight for truth in a world full of quick judgments and misconceptions? Would you have done the same thing in Destiny's position? Standing up for what's right, even if it meant risking your job and financial stability? How many of us have been in similar situations where we had to choose between staying quiet and speaking up? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd especially love to hear about your own experiences of standing up for what's right. Have you ever had a moment like Destiny's? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring real-life stories that make us think about what really matters. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.